In a world that hums with ceaseless noise sirens, blaring notifications, pinging voices shouting over one another in endless debates, there is a moment, fleeting and fragile, where silence finds you. Not the empty silence of absence, but the kind that carries weight like the pause between heartbeats. It's the silence. Maria felt one cold November evening standing alone in her small apartment, the city's chaos muted beyond her window. She was 34, a nurse working double shifts in a hospital stretched thin, her days a blur of masks, monitors, and the weight of lives in her hands. At home, her phone buzzed with news alerts, division anger, another crisis unfolding somewhere far, but feeling so close. Her heart raced, not from the caffeine she'd relied on for weeks, but from a deeper unrest, a sense that the world was unraveling and she with it. Maria sank into her worn couch, her hands trembling as she clutched a mug of tea that had long gone cold. She'd always been the strong one, her colleagues called her the rock, but tonight the cracks were showing. She thought of her patients, their eyes pleading for hope. Her estranged brother, who hadn't spoken to her since their last argument over politics, and the gnawing loneliness that followed her home each night. How did it come to this? She whispered to the empty room. The question wasn't just about her life, but the world itself fractured, furious, and so far from peace. In that moment of quiet, Maria's gaze fell on a small wooden cross hanging on her wall, a gift from her grandmother years ago. It was simple, unadorned, but it stirred something within her, a memory of words she'd heard in church as a child. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give it to you. John 14:27. Jesus spoke these words to his disciples, knowing they would face fear, betrayal, and a world that would test their faith. Maria wondered what that peace could mean now in a time when conflict seemed to seep into every corner of life, her workplace, her family, her own heart. The words of Pope Francis echoed in her mind, something she'd read in a newsletter from her parish. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the courage to live through it with love. She'd skimmed the article at the time, too tired to linger on it, but now the words felt like a lifeline. Peace wasn't a distant dream or a quiet retreat from the world's messiness. It was a choice, a way of being, even when everything around her screamed division. But how could she find it? How could anyone? Let's pause here, not to escape Maria's story, but to step into it more deeply. Her struggle is not hers alone. It's the ache of countless souls navigating a world that feels like it's pulling apart at the seams. Stress, disconnection, conflict. These are the currents we swim against daily. Yet, the teachings of Christ and the reflections of Pope Francis offer a compass not to avoid the storm, but to move through it with purpose and hope. Let's explore how their wisdom can light the way, starting with the call to embrace peace as an active living practice. The teaching Christ's peace as a gift and a task. When Jesus spoke of peace in the Gospel of John, he was preparing his disciples for a time of trial. The peace he offered wasn't a promise of calm seas, but an anchor for turbulent ones. It was a peace rooted in trust, in knowing that God's presence endures even when the world feels hostile. Pope Francis builds on this in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, writing authentic. Peace is not merely a pact to avoid conflict, but a commitment to recognize the dignity of the other, to build bridges, and to seek the common good. This peace requires us to see others not as enemies or obstacles, but as brothers and sisters, each carrying their own burdens and dreams. In today's world, this teaching feels both radical and urgent. Conflict is everywhere, not just in global headlines, but in the smaller personal battles. We fight the coworker who snaps under pressure, the friend who drifts away over differing views, the family member whose words cut too deep. The temptation is to retreat, to build walls, or to fight back with equal force. But Christ's peace calls us to something different, a courage that loves, despite disagreement, that listens even when it's hard, that chooses understanding over victory. For Maria, this teaching began to take root as she sat in her apartment, the cross on her wall, a quiet reminder. She thought of her brother Miguel and the argument that had driven a wedge between them. It wasn't just about politics, it was about hurt pride and the fear that they'd lost each other for good. She wanted to reach out, but the thought of another fight made her stomach churn. Yet, the words of Jesus and Pope Francis stirred a question. What if peace wasn't about erasing the conflict, but about facing it with a different heart, living the teaching practical steps for everyday peace? So, how do we live this peace in a world that feels anything but peaceful? Let's ground this in practical steps once Maria could take and ones we can all consider as we navigate our own challenges. 1. Begin with silence and prayer. Maria's moment of stillness, though accidental, was a starting point. Pope Francis often speaks of the need for a heart that listens, and silence is where that heart is formed. In a world of constant noise, carving out even 5 minutes to sit quietly to breathe, to pray can recenter us. It's not about escaping reality, but anchoring ourselves in God's presence. For Maria, this could mean starting her day with a simple prayer: Lord, give me your peace today and show me how to share it. This act of surrender opens the door to clarity and strength. Try this. Find a quiet space. Even if it's just your car before work or your bedroom at night, light a candle if it helps. May the peace prayer of Saint Francis: Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Let the word sink in, not as a ritual but as a commitment to carry that peace into your day. 2. Practice active listening. Conflict often grows when we stop hearing each other. Pope Francis emphasizes the art of encounter, urging us to listen with openness even to those we disagree with. For Maria, this meant reaching out to Miguel not to argue or prove a point, but to understand him. She could call him and say, I miss you. Can we talk? Not about what happened, but about what matters to you. This small act of humility could begin to mend what was broken. Try this. The next time you're in a tense conversation, pause before responding. Ask a question instead of stating your opinion. Can you tell me more about why you feel that way? This isn't about agreeing, but about honoring the other person's dignity. It's a step toward peace. 3. Act with small gestures of kindness. Christ's peace is often lived in the small, unglamorous moments. Pope Francis reminds us that love is shown more in deeds than in words. For Maria, this could mean bringing coffee to a stressed colleague, smiling at a patient despite her own exhaustion, or writing Miguel a note saying, I'm thinking of you. These acts don't solve the world's problems, but they ripple outward, softening hearts and building bridges. Try this. Each day, choose one small act of kindness for someone in your life: a co worker, a neighbor, a stranger. It could be a compliment, a helping hand, or a moment of patience. These gestures are seeds of peace planted in the ordinary. Part 4. Reflect on your own heart. Peace begins within. Jesus said, First, take the log out of your own eye. Matthew 7. A call to examine our own faults before judging others. Maria realized her anger toward Miguel was partly about her own pride. She wanted to be right. Reflecting on this, she could ask herself, what's driving my reaction? Fear, hurt. How can I let go? Pope Francis encourages daily examination of conscience, a moment to ask God for forgiveness and guidance. Try this. At the end of each day, spend a few minutes reflecting. What moments today felt peaceful? Where did I contribute to conflict? Even unintentionally, ask God to help you grow in patience and love. This practice builds a heart ready for peace. Jat 5. Seek community. We don't walk this path alone. Pope Francis speaks of the church as a field hospital, a place where wounded souls find healing together. Maria could join a parish group, attend a retreat, or simply talk to a trusted friend about her struggles. Sharing her journey would remind her that peace is a shared mission, not a solo endeavor. Try this. Connect with a community that shares your values, a church group, a volunteer organization, or even an online forum. Share your challenges and listen to others. Together, you can support each other in living Christ's peace. Maria's first step. The next morning, Maria woke with a resolve she hadn't felt in weeks. The world hadn't changed. The hospital was still understaffed. The news still grim, but something in her had shifted. She sat at her kitchen table, lit a candle, and prayed, Lord, I don't know how to fix everything, but I want to start with peace. Help me today. The words felt clumsy, but they were honest. At work, she tried something new. When a colleague snapped at her over a scheduling mix up, she took a breath instead of biting back. I know we're all stretched thin, she said gently. Can I help with anything? The colleague's face softened, and for a moment the tension eased. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a beginning. That evening, Maria picked up her phone and typed a message to Miguel. Hey, I've been thinking about you. I miss our talks. Can we grab coffee soon? Her finger hovered over the send button, fear whispering that he'd ignore her or worse. But she thought of Christ's words, My peace I give to you, and pressed send. The message flew into the unknown, a small act of courage, a step toward reconciliation, the ripple effect. Maria's story is just one thread in the tapestry of countless lives seeking peace. Her prayer, her kindness, her outreach to Miguel, they seem small but they carry the weight of Christ's promise. Pope Francis writes, Every act of love, however small, radiates God's light. These acts don't erase conflict, but they transform it, turning battlegrounds into places of encounter. Imagine a world where each of us took one step toward peace today. A parent listens to their teenager instead of lecturing. A co-worker offers a word of encouragement instead of criticism. A stranger smiles instead of looking away. These moments woven together create a fabric of hope, a living testament to the peace Christ offers. As Maria's candle flickered that night, she felt a warmth she hadn't known in months. The world was still loud, still broken, but she was no longer alone in it. She was beginning to live Christ's peace not as a distant ideal, but as a daily choice. And in that choice, she found something stronger than the chaos, a quiet, unshakable strength, a gift from the one who promised, I am with you always. Matthew 28:20. Her story doesn't end here. The path to peace is long, winding through moments of doubt and triumph, but Maria's first steps show us what's possible. In the days to come, she would face new challenges, new opportunities to live her faith. And as she did, she would discover that peace is not a destination but a journey, one we're all invited to walk together. The city's pulse beat on relentless as Maria stepped into the pale light of a new morning. Her message to Miguel hung in the digital ether, unanswered, a quiet risk she'd taken in the name of peace. She tucked her phone into her scrubs, its silence louder than the hospital's clamor as she began her shift. The weight of yesterday's prayer lingered, a fragile anchor amidst the storm of beeping monitors and hurried footsteps. She'd asked for peace, but today it felt like a whisper against a gale. A patient's fever spiked, a coworker called in sick, and the news on the break room TV blared about protests downtown division carved into every headline. Yet something in Maria stirred a resolve to carry that whisper forward, to see if Christ's peace could hold in the chaos. As she moved through her rounds, checking charts and adjusting IVs, Maria's thoughts drifted to a story she'd heard in a homily years ago, one that felt alive now in the hospital's frenetic hum. It was about Jesus calming the storm on the Sea of Galilee. Mark 35 to 41. The disciples, terrified as waves crashed over their boat, woke Jesus, who was sleeping peacefully. Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? They cried. With a word, Jesus stilled the wind and waves, then turned to them. Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? Maria wondered about that question. Was her own fear about Miguel, her patience, the world's unrest, a lack of faith? Or was it something Jesus could meet, not with rebuke, but with a peace deeper than the storm? Then the Pope Francis had spoken to this in a way that resonated now. In his Angelus address of June 2021, he said, "Faith begins when we realize we are in need of salvation. We are not self sufficient. By ourselves, we flounder." Maria felt that floundering her strength, as the rock crumbling under the weight of endless demands. But Francis went on, Jesus does not leave us alone in the storm. He invites us to trust, to call out to Him. This wasn't a call to ignore the waves, but to face them knowing Christ was in the boat. For Maria, the hospital was her sea and trust was her lifeline. Today, that trust would be tested. As she checked on Mr. Carter, an elderly patient recovering from pneumonia, his eyes met hers with a weariness that mirrored her own. "You look tired, Maria," he said, his voice raspy but kind. She smiled, deflecting. "Just another day." But he pressed, "No, I mean in your soul, I see it. This place, it takes everything, doesn't it?" His words cut through her armor, and for a moment she felt exposed. Mr. Carter wasn't just a patient. He was a mirror reflecting her own unspoken ache. She nodded, unable to speak, and he added, "When I feel lost, I talk to God. Not fancy prayers, just talking." "Try it, Maria. He's listening." His words stayed with her. As she moved to the next room, then the next, each patient a story of struggle and resilience. She thought of Pope Francis's call in Fratelli Tutti to see every person as a brother or sister, their dignity a sacred thread in God's tapestry. Could she live that here in the rush of a 12-hour shift? Could she see Christ in McCarter's tired eyes, in the frantic intern who'd snapped at her earlier, in the stranger on the news whose anger seemed so far from her own heart? The question wasn't abstract, it was a challenge, one that demanded she act differently today. Maria's first chance came at lunch when she sat in the break room with Lena, a fellow nurse who'd been short tempered all morning. The TV droned on about the protests, and Lena muttered, "This city's falling apart. People just want to fight." Maria's instinct was to stay quiet to avoid the tension. But she remembered Francis's words. Peace begins with an open heart ready to encounter the other. She took a breath and said, "It's hard, isn't it? All this division. What do you think could bring people together?" Lena looked surprised, then softened. "I don't know. Maybe if we stopped shouting and started listening." It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. A crack in the wall between them, letting a sliver of light through. That small exchange shifted something in Maria. She began to notice opportunities, moments where a word, a gesture could build a bridge. When the intern Alex fumbled a procedure and braced for criticism, she said, "You're doing your best. We all are. Let's figure this out together." His shoulders relaxed, and for the first time that day, he smiled. These weren't grand acts, but they felt like prayers, each one a plea for peace in the storm. Yet, the storm wasn't just external. Maria's phone buzzed as she left the hospital, and her heart leapt. Miguel had replied. "Coffee sounds good," his message read. "But I'm still mad. Can we keep it civil?" The words stung, but they were honest. A door cracked open. She typed back, "I want that too. Saturday at the usual spot." As she hit send, she felt the weight of uncertainty but also a spark of hope. This was what Pope Francis meant when he spoke of the courage to live through conflict with love. It wasn't about erasing the hurt, but stepping toward it, trusting God to guide the way. That evening, Maria sat at her kitchen table, the same candle flickering as the night before. She opened her Bible to the story of the storm, reading it slowly, letting the words sink in. Jesus didn't promise a life without waves, but he promised his presence. She thought of Mr. Carter's advice to just talk to God, and so she did. "Lord," she whispered, "I'm scared of messing up with Miguel, of burning out of this world that feels so broken. But I want to trust you. Show me how to keep going." The prayer wasn't polished, but it was real, and in its rawness, she felt a quiet strength. This strength carried her into the next day. where the hospital's chaos met her with fresh challenges. A new patient. Mrs. Rivera arrived in the ward, her chart noting a history of anxiety worsened by the city's unrest. She clutched a rosary, her hands trembling as she spoke of her fear. I don't go out anymore. The anger out there, it's too much. Maria recognized that fear, the same one that had kept her awake nights wondering if peace was even possible. She sat by Mrs. Rivera's bed, not as a nurse checking vitals, but as a sister. I get it, she said. It's overwhelming. But sometimes small things help, like praying or talking to someone who cares. Can I pray with you? Mrs. Rivera nodded, and together they recited the Our Father, their voices soft but steady. It was a moment of calm, a shared refuge in the storm. This encounter reminded Maria of Christ's teaching in Matthew 25:40. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Pope Francis echoes this in his call to serve the marginalized, to see Christ in those who suffer. Mrs. Rivera wasn't just a patient, she was Christ asking for compassion. Maria realized that peace wasn't something she could hoard, it was meant to be shared, especially with those who felt forgotten. As the week unfolded, Maria began to weave these lessons into her life not as a checklist but as a way of being. She started each morning with a moment of prayer, asking for the grace to see others as Christ did. At work, she listened more, judged less, and offered kindness where she once might have stayed silent. She even joined a parish prayer group, a small circle of people who met weekly to share their struggles and hopes. There, she found a community that reminded her she wasn't alone in her quest for peace. One evening, as she prepared for her coffee with Miguel, Maria reflected on how these small steps had changed her. The hospital was still demanding, the world still fractured, but she felt less like she was drowning. Pope Francis's words from Gaudete et Exsultate came to mind. Holiness is not about perfection, but about living each moment with love and trust in God. She wasn't perfect. Her patience still faltered. Her fear still crept in, but she was trying, and that was enough. Saturday arrived, and Maria walked to the cafe where she and Miguel used to spend hours talking about everything and nothing. The air was crisp, the streets alive with the city's restless energy. She felt a knot in her stomach as she pushed open the door and saw him at a corner table, his face guarded but not closed. They hugged a tentative embrace and sat down. Thanks for coming, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. I just, I want us to be okay. Miguel nodded, his eyes on his coffee. I do too. But it's hard, Maria. We see things so differently now. She took a breath, remembering the call to listen to encounter. I know, she said. And I don't want to fight about that. I just want to hear you, really hear you. Can we start there? He looked up surprised, and for the first time his guard softened. Yeah, he said, we can try. Their conversation wasn't a fairy tale. They didn't resolve years of hurt in 1 hour, but they listened, they shared, and they laughed a little. Remembering old times, it was a beginning, a fragile bridge built on trust and love. As they parted, Miguel said, let's do this again. No pressure, just us. Maria smiled, her heart lighter. I'd like that. Walking home, Maria felt the city's noise differently. It was still loud, still chaotic, but it no longer overwhelmed her. She thought of Jesus in the boat, his peace, a gift that didn't depend on the storm's end. Pope Francis's words rang true. Peace is a journey, not a possession. She was on that journey now, not alone, but with Christ, with her community, with the strangers and loved ones she met each day. Her candle waited at home, a small beacon in the dark. As she lit it that night, she prayed again, not for the world to change, but for the strength to change it one moment at a time. She thought of Mr. Carter, Mrs. Rivera, Lena, Alex, Miguel, each a face of Christ, each a chance to live his peace. The storm hadn't passed, but she wasn't afraid. She was learning to trust, to love, to carry the light forward. And so the journey continued. Each step, a prayer, each encounter, a chance to make peace real. Maria didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she wouldn't face it alone. The one who calmed the sea was with her, whispering, "Take courage, I am here." The cafe's warmth lingered in Maria's heart as she stepped into the brisk evening, the city's lights flickering like stars against the dusk. Her coffee with Miguel had been a small victory, not a resolution, but a reconnection, a thread of hope woven through their shared history. She walked home, her steps lighter, though the weight of the world still pressed in the newsstands, shouting headlines of unrest, the distant wail of sirens, the quiet ache of a long shift waiting for her tomorrow. Yet something had shifted within her, a growing trust that peace wasn't a far off dream, but a daily practice, one she could choose even when the storms raged on. At home, Maria lit her candle, its flame a steady companion. She opened her Bible, drawn to the Beatitudes in Matthew 5 3 to 12, where Jesus taught, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." The words felt both comforting and challenging. Peacemakers weren't passive. They were active, building bridges where walls stood, sowing love where anger festered. Pope Francis had reflected on this in his 2020 World Day of Peace message. Peace is a craft requiring patience, dialogue, and respect for the dignity of every person. Maria wondered what it meant to be a peacemaker in her world, not just with Miguel, but in the hospital, her neighborhood, the fractured spaces she moved through each day. Her thoughts were interrupted by a text from Lena, her colleague. "You free tomorrow after work? Need to talk?" Maria hesitated. Lena had been distant lately, her sharp edges softened only briefly in their break room conversation. But the invitation felt like an opening, a chance to live the Beatitudes in a small, real way. She replied, "Sure, let's grab a bite." As she set her phone down, Maria felt a mix of curiosity and caution. Lena's struggles were different from her own rumors of a tough divorce, financial strain, but Maria sensed a shared hunger for something more, a peace that could hold against life's relentless waves. The next day at the hospital was a blur of urgency. A flu outbreak had spiked admissions, and the ward buzzed with tension. Maria moved through her tasks, checking vitals, comforting patients, and dodging the frayed tempers of an overworked staff. In the midst of it, she noticed Alex, the intern, struggling to keep up. His hands shook as he fumbled an IV line, and a senior nurse barked, "Get it together, Alex!" His face flushed, and Maria saw the shame in his eyes. She remembered the Beatitudes, "Blessed are the merciful," and approached him quietly. "Hey," she said, "let me show you a trick for this. You're doing fine." Her words weren't magic, but they steadied him, a small act of mercy in a high stakes moment. Later, as she sat with Mrs. Rivera, the anxious patient from last week, Maria saw progress. The rosary still rested in Mrs. Rivera's hands, but her grip was looser, her eyes brighter. "I prayed like you did," she told Maria, "and it helped. Not perfect, but better." Maria smiled, feeling the truth of Pope Francis's words. Every small gesture of love is a step toward peace. Mrs. Rivera's calm was a reminder that peacemaking wasn't about grand gestures but about presence, about showing up with compassion again and again. After her shift, Maria met Lena at a diner near the hospital, its neon sign buzzing in the twilight. Lena looked worn, her usual bravado replaced by a quiet heaviness. Over greasy fries and coffee, she opened up. "It's everything," she said, her voice low. "The divorce, the bills, this job. And then I see all this hate on the news, people tearing each other apart. It makes me wonder what's the point." Maria listened, her heart aching. Lena's words echoed her own fears, the ones she'd faced in her apartment that lonely night. But she also heard an invitation, a chance to share the peace she was learning to carry. "I've been there," Maria said, feeling like it's all too much. "But something's helping me a little at least. It's not about fixing the world, but about finding small ways to make it better, like praying or just being kind when I want to snap." Lena raised an eyebrow, skeptical but curious. "You mean like church stuff?" Maria laughed softly. "Kind of, but it's more about living it, being patient with Alex, listening to you, trying to see the people as, I don't know, part of the same family. She thought of Pope Francis's Fratelli Tutti, where he wrote, "We are all brothers and sisters, called to build a world of solidarity." Lena didn't respond right away, but her silence wasn't rejection. It was thoughtfulness, a seed planted. Their conversation stretched late, weaving through Lena's fears and Maria's hopes. It wasn't a conversion moment, but it was real a dialogue, as Francis described, that honored the other's dignity. As they parted, Lena said, "You're different lately, Maria, calmer. I don't know how you do it, but thanks for listening." Maria smiled, feeling the weight and privilege of being a peacemaker even in this small way. The week unfolded with new challenges. Maria's prayer group at the parish became a lifeline, a place where she could share her struggles and hear others. One member, Javier, a retired teacher, spoke of his work with a local youth program trying to steer kids away from gang violence. "It's hard," he said, "but I think of Jesus saying, 'Love your enemies.'" Matthew Santes. Or, "Those kids aren't enemies, but the world makes them feel like they are. I just try to show them they're not alone." His story struck Maria. Peacemaking wasn't just about resolving conflict, it was about preventing it, about loving before the walls went up. Inspired, Maria began to look for ways to extend peace beyond her immediate circle. At the hospital, she noticed the janitorial staff often overlooked their work, invisible to most. One of them, Rosa, always hummed softly as she cleaned. Maria started greeting her by name, asking about her day. One afternoon, Rosa shared that her daughter was struggling in school, caught in the crossfire of neighborhood tensions. "She's scared," Rosa said, "and I don't know how to help her." Maria thought of Javier's work and offered, "My parish has a youth group. Maybe your daughter could check it out." "No pressure." Rosa's eyes lit up. "You think they'd take her?" Maria nodded, promising to connect them. It was a small bridge, but it felt like the craft of peace Francis described, patient, practical, rooted in love. At home, Maria's candlelit prayers grew richer, woven with the faces of those she'd encountered: Lena, Alex, Mrs. Rivera, Rosa Miguel. She read the Beatitudes again, lingering on "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Pope Francis had said righteousness wasn't about rigid rules, but about seeking justice with mercy, about building a world where everyone could flourish. Maria saw this hunger in her own heart, not for perfection, but for a life that reflected Christ's love, even in the mess. Her next coffee with Miguel tested this hunger. They met again at the cafe, the air between them less tense but still fragile. He opened up about his frustrations, his job, the political divides, tearing through his friend group, the sense that no one listened anymore. Maria felt the old urge to argue, to defend her own views, but she remembered Jesus' call to love enemies, even when the enemy was just a brother who saw the world differently. "That sounds heavy," she said, "and I bet it's lonely feeling like you're shouting into the void." Miguel nodded, surprised by her empathy. "Yeah, it is. I didn't think you'd get that." They didn't solve their differences, but they shared stories, laughed over old memories, and parted with a hug that felt warmer, more certain. This encounter emboldened Maria. She began to see every interaction as a chance to be a peacemaker. At work, she organized a gratitude board in the break room where staff could post notes of thanks, a nod to a colleague's help, a patient's kindness. It was simple, but it shifted the ward's mood, reminding everyone of their shared humanity. One note from Alex read, "To Maria for believing in me." She teared up reading it, seeing how small acts could ripple outward. Yet the world's storms didn't relent. One evening, Maria watched news of the protest downtown escalating, images of anger and division filling the screen. Her heart sank, the old fear creeping in. She thought of Pope Francis's words in his 2023 World Day of Peace message: "No one can be saved alone. Peace requires us to work together to build a culture of encounter." She felt a pull to do more, to move beyond her small sphere. At her prayer group, she raised the idea of a community event, a vigil for peace open to all, no agenda, but to pray and listen. Javier loved it, and others joined in, energized by the chance to live their faith publicly. Planning the vigil became a new focus for Maria. She reached out to local churches, a mosque, and a synagogue inspired by Francis's vision of interfaith solidarity. She met Aisha, a young imam, who shared her passion for unity. Our faiths are different, Aisha said, but our desire for peace is the same. Together, they envisioned a simple gathering, candles, prayers, and stories from people touched by conflict, from gang violence to family estrangement. Maria felt nervous but alive, sensing this was what it meant to be a child of God, as the Beatitudes promised. As the vigil took shape, Maria faced doubts. Would anyone come? Would it make a difference in a city so divided? She brought these fears to her candlelit prayers, finding solace in Christ's words, "Do not be afraid." Matthew 14:27. Pope Francis had written, "Faith does not eliminate difficulties, but it gives us the strength to face them." Maria clung to this, trusting that her efforts, however small, were part of God's work. The night of the vigil arrived a chilly evening in a park near the hospital. Maria stood with Aisha, Javier, and a small crowd, parishioners, hospital staff, strangers, drawn by flyers. Candles glowed in the dark, their flames dancing as voices rose in prayer, song, and story. Rosa's daughter spoke, her voice trembling. "I'm tired of being scared. I want to believe we can be better." An older man shared his regret over a decades long feud with his son. Lena, there at Maria's invitation, whispered, "This is powerful." Maria felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but from awe. This was peace, not as an end to conflict, but as a shared commitment to love through it. The vigil didn't stop the protests or heal the city's wounds, but it planted seeds. People lingered, exchanging numbers, promising to meet again. Maria saw Christ in their faces, in their courage to show up. She thought of the Beatitudes, "Blessed are the peacemakers," and felt their truth. She wasn't changing the world, but she was changing her corner of it, one encounter at a time. Back home, Maria lit her candle, its light a mirror of the vigil's glow. She prayed for Lena, Miguel, Rosa's daughter, the city. She read Pope Francis's words, "Peace is a gift we receive and a task we undertake." She was learning to receive that gift, to trust Christ's presence in the storm, and to undertake the task of sharing it. The world was still broken, but she was not. She was a peacemaker, a child of God, carrying the light forward step by faithful step. The park's candlelight lingered in Maria's memory. As she woke to a new day, the city's hum already seeping through her window. The vigil had been a beacon, a moment where strangers became neighbors, their shared prayers, a fragile but real defiance against division. Yet the morning news brought no reprieve. Clashes downtown had worsened, and social media buzzed with vitriol. Maria felt the familiar tug of despair, but it was tempered now by something stronger, a conviction born of a journey. The Beatitudes' call to be a peacemaker echoed in her heart, intertwined with Pope Francis's words from Fratelli Tutti. We are called to love everyone without exception, yet to love an enemy requires a heart capable of embracing the cross. Maria was beginning to understand that cross not as suffering alone, but as the courage to love through conflict, to carry Christ's peace into the world's brokenness. Her shift at the hospital loomed, but first she sat at her kitchen table. The candle's wick blackened from last night's prayer. She opened her Bible to John 15:12-13, where Jesus said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends." The words struck her deeply. Love wasn't just a feeling, it was a sacrifice, a choice to put others first, even when it costs something pride, comfort, time. Pope Francis had reflected on this in a 2022 homily. To love as Jesus loves means to serve, to forgive, to give ourselves for others, even those who wound us. Maria wondered how she could live this love today, not in grand gestures but in the ordinary moments of her life. As she walked to the hospital, her phone buzzed a message from Aisha, the Imam from the vigil. Last night was beautiful, it read. People are asking for another gathering. You in? Maria smiled, typing back, absolutely. Let's make it happen. The vigil had sparked something, a ripple of hope that refused to fade. She thought of Rosa's daughter, whose voice had trembled but held firm, and of Lena, who'd stayed until the candles burned low. These connections, fragile as they were, felt like the greater love Jesus spoke of, a love that built community, that laid down fear for the sake of others. At the hospital, the flu outbreak had eased, but the staff's exhaustion hung heavy. Maria noticed the gratitude board in the break room now covered with notes. Thanks for the coffee, Lena. To Dr. Patel for staying late, Maria, you're a lifesaver. The board was her idea, but its impact surprised her. Small acknowledgments weaving threads of kindness through the ward's chaos. She added her own note to Rosa for your smile every day. It was a quiet act, but it felt like love, a way to honor the dignity of someone often unseen. Her rounds brought her to Mr. Carter, whose recovery was steady but slow. He grinned as she checked his chart. You're glowing, Maria, he said. Something's different. She laughed, adjusting his oxygen. Maybe it's just sleep, but he shook his head. No, it's faith. I saw it at that vigil, heard about it from Rosa. You're doing God's work. His words warmed her, but they also challenged her. Was she truly living Jesus' commandment to love? She thought of Lena's struggles, Miguel's guarded heart, the city's unrest. There was so much more to do. Mid-shift, Maria overheard a heated exchange in the hallway. Alex, the intern, was arguing with the paramedic about a patient transfer gone wrong. You didn't follow protocol. Alex snapped, his voice tight. The paramedic fired back. You try keeping up out there. Maria recognized the tension, stress boiling over, turning colleagues into adversaries. She remembered Pope Francis's call to forgive, to love even those who wound us. Stepping in, she said calmly, Hey, we're all stretched thin. Alex, can you walk me through what happened? And you, she nodded to the paramedic. What's your side? Her tone wasn't commanding but inviting, and both men paused, surprised. They explained, voices cooling, and together they sorted out the mix up. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it diffused the moment, a small victory for peace. This encounter stayed with Maria as she moved through her day. She began to see every interaction as a chance to lay down her life, not in dramatic sacrifice, but in the quiet surrender of ego, impatience, judgment. When a patient's family lashed out, frustrated by wait times, she listened without defensiveness, offering, I know it's hard. We're doing our best, and I'm here to help. When Lena vented about her ex husband's latest demands, Maria didn't offer solutions but presence, saying, That sounds so tough. I'm here for you. These moments were her cross, her way of loving as Jesus loved. After her shift, Maria joined her prayer group, where the vigil's success was the talk of the evening. Javier shared that a local news outlet had covered it, calling it a rare moment of unity. The group buzzed with ideas for the next gathering, a community meal perhaps, to keep the momentum going. Maria felt a surge of purpose but also a nagging doubt. Could these efforts really make a difference in a city so divided? She voiced this to the group, and an older woman, Clara, responded, Maria, think of Jesus feeding the 5,000. John 6, 1 to 14. He didn't solve world hunger, but he fed who was there. That's what we do. Love who's in front of us. Clara's words echoed Pope Francis's teaching. Holiness is found in the small, faithful steps of daily life. Maria nodded, reassured. Her task wasn't to fix the world, but to love it one person at a time. Inspired, Maria reached out to Miguel, suggesting another coffee. He agreed and they met at their usual cafe, the air between them easier now. He opened up about his job, loss, a blow he'd kept private. I feel like I'm failing, he admitted. And all this fighting out there, it makes it worse. Maria felt the weight of his words, remembering Jesus' love for the broken-hearted. You're not failing, she said. You're still you, and that's enough. We'll figure this out together. Miguel's eyes softened, and for the first time he reached for her hand. Thanks, Maria. I've missed this us. Their talk wasn't about politics or past hurts, but about hope, a shared commitment to rebuild. It was love in action, the kind that lays down pride for connection. This reconnection fueled Maria's resolve. She began to seek out new ways to live Christ's commandment. At the hospital, she volunteered to mentor new interns, remembering how her kindness had steadied Alex. She started with a young woman, Priya, whose nerves mirrored Alex's early days. You've got this, Maria told her, guiding her through a procedure. Mistakes are how we learn. Priya's gratitude was a reminder that love multiplies each act, inspiring another. Outside work, Maria leaned into the community meal planning with Aisha and Javier. They chose a local community center, inviting people from all walks, churchgoers, mosque members, neighbors caught in the city's tensions. Maria suggested a story table where guests could share experiences of conflict and healing. Aisha loved it, adding stories, build empathy. That's where peace starts. As they planned, Maria felt the truth of Pope Francis's words. Dialogue is the oxygen of peace. This meal wouldn't end the city's strife, but it could be a space where love took root. Yet challenges persisted. One evening, Maria saw a viral video of the protests, shouts, smoke faces contorted in rage. Her heart sank, the old fear whispering that her efforts were futile. She brought this to her candlelit prayer, reading John 16:33, in the world you will have tribulation. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus' words were a lifeline, a reminder that peace wasn't the absence of trouble, but the presence of hope. Pope Francis had said, the cross is the ultimate sign of love, transforming pain into redemption. Maria clung to this, praying, Lord, help me love through the pain. Show me the way. Her answer came unexpectedly. At the hospital, Rosa approached her beaming. My daughter's going to the youth group, she said. She's smiling again, Maria. Thank you. The news was a spark, a reminder that small acts, her suggestion to Rosa, her outreach to Miguel, the vigil, were bearing fruit. Maria realized that love, like the loaves and fishes, could multiply beyond what she could see. This realization carried her to the community meal held on a crisp Saturday evening. The community center buzzed with vibe, with the live tables laden with potluck dishes, laughter mingling with the clink of plates. Maria, Aisha, and Javier welcomed guests, their diversity a testament to the city's heart, young and old, rich and poor, faces of every hue. The story table was a hit. A teenager spoke of escaping gang life, crediting a mentor's love. An elderly woman shared her reconciliation with her estranged daughter. Lena, there with a homemade casserole, whispered to Maria, I didn't expect this. It's real. Maria nodded, her throat tight. This was the greater love Jesus spoke of, a community laying down differences for connection. As the evening wound down, Maria stepped outside, the stars bright above the city's glow. She felt a profound gratitude, not for an end to conflict, but for the chance to love through it. Pope Francis's words from Gaudete et Exultate echoed. We are all called to be saints, not by doing extraordinary things, but by living love in the ordinary. Maria was no saint, but she was trying, and in that effort, she found peace. Back home, her candle flickered as she prayed, naming the faces of the day: Rosa, Priya, Miguel, the meal's guests. She read John 15 again, Jesus' command to love as he loved. She thought of the cross not as a burden, but as a bridge, a way to meet others in their pain. The world's tribulation hadn't ceased, but Maria was learning to take heart, to trust that Christ's victory was hers to share. Her journey wasn't over. The city's wounds ran deep and her own heart still faltered. But each act of love, each forgiveness, each story, each moment of presence was a step toward peace. Maria knew now that she was part of something greater, a tapestry of love woven by countless hands, guided by the one who loved first. And as she blew out her candle, she felt ready for whatever came next, her heart open, her faith alive, her life a testament to the peace that surpasses understanding. The community center's warmth clung to Maria as she stepped into the cool night, the echo of shared stories and laughter fading behind her. The meal had been a triumph, not in erasing the city's divides, but in showing what was possible when people chose love over fear. Her heart was full, yet the weight of the world remained. The protests downtown had calmed but not ceased, and her hospital shift loomed a reminder of the relentless demands of her calling. As she walked home, the stars above seemed to whisper a promise. One she'd come to know through her journey: I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Matthew 28:20. Jesus' words paired with Pope Francis's call to carry the gospel in our hands, and hearts felt like a mandate now, not just to seek peace, but to become it, to embody Christ's love in a world that so desperately needed it. At home, Maria lit her candle, its flame a familiar friend. She opened her Bible to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 4 to 7, Paul's hymn to love. Love is patient, love is kind. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. The words washed over her, a summation of the path she'd walked from her first tentative prayer for peace to the vigil's candlelit hope, from her reconnection with Miguel to the community meal's shared table. Pope Francis had reflected on this passage in Amoris Laetitia, writing, Love is not an ideal, but a daily commitment, a craft that shapes our actions and transforms our world. Maria saw her life as that craft, now each choice a stitch in the fabric of peace, each moment a chance to reflect Christ's enduring love. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Priya, the intern she was mentoring. Thanks for today, Maria. I was so nervous, but you made me feel like I could do this. Maria smiled, typing back. You're stronger than you know. Keep going. Priya's growth was a mirror of her own, a reminder that love wasn't just given, but received, a cycle that strengthened everyone it touched. She thought of all the faces woven into her days: Lena, Rosa, Aisha, Javier, Mr. Carter, Mrs. Rivera, Miguel. Each was a thread, each a story of struggle and grace, each a reason to keep crafting peace. The next morning, Maria woke early, her shift not starting until noon. She sat with her candle and Bible, praying for the strength to live love today. She thought of Pope Francis's words from his 2024 World Mission Sunday message: We are all called to be missionaries of love, to bring Christ's light to the peripheries of our world. The hospital was her periphery, a place of pain and healing where love could shine in the smallest acts: a gentle word, a steady hand, a moment of patience. But she felt a pull to go further, to carry that light beyond her workplace into the city's wounded heart. At the hospital, the ward was quieter, the flu outbreak waning, but the staff's weariness lingered. Maria noticed the gratitude board now, a fixture, its notes multiplying. To Alex for covering my shift, to Maria for always listening. She added one for Lena, for your courage every day. Lena had been opening up more, her skepticism softening, and Maria sensed a hunger in her for something deeper, perhaps faith, though she never pushed. Love, she'd learned, was patient, waiting for the other to be ready. Her rounds brought her to a new patient, Jamal, a young man injured in the protests, a broken arm from a scuffle, his face etched with anger and fear. I was just trying to speak up, he told her, his voice tight. But it's all a mess out there. Maria listened, her heart aching for the city's youth, caught in a cycle of rage and despair. She thought of 1 Corinthians 13, love hopes all things, and said, I hear you, Jamal. It's hard to see a way out, but you are here healing. That's a start? He shrugged, unconvinced, but her words lingered, a seed of hope planted in rocky soil. Later in the break room, Maria overheard Alex and Priya talking about the protest. It's pointless, Alex said. Everyone's just yelling. Priya nodded but added, maybe, but that vigil Maria helped with, it felt different. Like people actually cared. Maria joined them, curious. What made it different for you, Priya? She asked. Priya thought for a moment. It wasn't about winning. It was about listening, being together. I want more of that. Her words sparked an idea in Maria. What if the hospital could host something similar, a space for staff and patients to share, to heal? She tucked the thought away, sensing it was a call to act. After her shift, Maria met Aisha at a coffee shop to plan their next community event. The meal's success had inspired them to think bigger, a series of peace circles, small gatherings where people could share stories and build trust. Aisha suggested partnering with local schools, targeting youth like Rosa's daughter and Jamal. They're the future, she said, but they need to see peace is possible. Maria agreed, feeling the weight of 1 Corinthians 13's call to endure. This work wasn't quick or easy, but it was love in action, a mission to carry Christ's light to the peripheries. As they brainstormed, Maria shared her hospital idea, a peace circle for staff and patients. Aisha's eyes lit up. That's powerful. A hospital's where people are raw, vulnerable. It's the perfect place to start. They sketched a plan, a monthly gathering open to all with simple rules: listen, respect, share from the heart. Maria felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Could she pull this off? She thought of Pope Francis's words, love trusts in God's grace which makes all things possible. She decided to trust, to step forward in faith. The next day, Maria pitched the idea to her supervisor, Dr. Patel, expecting skepticism. But Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. We need this, Maria. Burnout's high and patients feel the tension too. Let's try it. With his support, Maria set a date for the first peace circle, spreading the word through the gratitude board and staff emails. She invited Lena, Alex, Priya, and even Rosa, hoping they'd bring others. To her surprise, Mrs. Rivera, now discharged but visiting for a check-up, overheard and asked to join. I want to share what prayer did for me, she said. Maria's heart swelled. Love was multiplying just as Jesus' loaves and fishes had. Meanwhile, her connection with Miguel deepened. They met for dinner, their third time in weeks, and the ease between them felt like a gift. He shared that he'd found a new job, a relief but also a challenge. I'm scared I'll mess it up, he admitted. Maria thought of love's patience and said, You won't. And if it's hard, I'm here. He smiled, then hesitated. You've changed, Maria. You're calmer even with all this chaos. What's your secret? She laughed softly. No secret. Just faith and a lot of trying. I'm learning to love like Jesus did, not perfectly, but every day. Miguel nodded, thoughtful. Maybe I need some of that. It wasn't a conversion, but it was an opening, a moment of grace. This conversation emboldened Maria to invite Miguel to the hospital's peace circle. No pressure, she said, but it's about sharing stories, finding common ground. To her surprise, he agreed. I've seen what you're doing, he said. It's real. I want to be part of it. His words were a reminder that love endures, bearing fruit in unexpected ways. The peace circle arrived, held in a quiet conference room after hours. Maria set up chairs in a circle, a candle in the center, a nod to her nightly prayers. About 20 people came. Lena, Alex, Priya Rosa, Mrs. Rivera, Miguel Jamal, and others from janitors to doctors. Maria opened with a simple welcome. This is a space to listen, to share, to heal. No judgment, just love. She shared first briefly about her journey, her fear, her faith, the vigil's hope. Her vulnerability set the tone. Mrs. Rivera spoke next, her rosary in hand. I was so scared, she said, but praying with Maria showed me God's peace is real. Jamal, skeptical but present, shared his anger at the protest's chaos. I don't know if peace is possible, he said, but I'm here. Lena, usually guarded, surprised everyone. I'm struggling, she admitted. But this hospital, this board, you're keeping me going. Miguel spoke last, his voice steady. I was mad at the world, at my sister, but she showed me we can disagree and still love. That's why I'm here. The room was silent, not with tension, but with awe as love wove their stories together. The circle lasted an hour, but its impact lingered. People lingered, exchanging hugs and numbers. Jamal approached Maria, his guard down. I didn't expect to feel hopeful, he said. Thanks for this. Lena pulled her aside, eyes wet. I want what you have, Maria. Not sure what it is, but I'm ready to try. Maria hugged her, whispering, We'll find it together. The candle's flame danced, a symbol of the light they'd kindled. In authority, dates followed. The peace circle became a monthly event, growing each time. Maria and Aisha's peace circles in the community took off too, with schools hosting sessions for teens. Rosa's daughter joined, finding a safe space to dream. The city's wounds didn't heal overnight, but these circles were oases, places where love, patient, kind, enduring took root. Maria's prayer group celebrated these steps, but Clara, the older member, offered a gentle warning. Love endures, but it's tested. Stay close to Christ. Her words proved prophetic. One evening, Maria saw news of a new protest flare up, this time near the hospital. Fear gripped her. Would their work unravel? She brought this to her candlelit prayer, reading 1 Corinthians 13 again, love never fails. Pope Francis's words from Evangelii Gaudium echoed, faith is a flame that grows stronger the more it is shared. Maria resolved to keep sharing, to keep loving, no matter the cost. The test came soon. At the next peace circle, a new attendee, a nurse named Tom, spoke bitterly about the protests. It's all hypocrisy, he said. People talk peace but fight anyway. His words sparked tension, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Maria felt her own fear rise, but remembered love's call to hope. Tom, I hear your frustration, she said. What would peace look like for you? Her question disarmed him and he softened, sharing his exhaustion from working amid the city's chaos. The circle listened, and the tension eased, not erased, but transformed by love's patience. This moment taught Maria that love wasn't about agreement, but presence, about enduring even when it was hard. She saw it in Lena, who joined the prayer group, tentative but curious. In Miguel, who helped plan a peace circle at his workplace. In Jamal, who returned, his anger giving way to questions about faith. Each was a testament to love's power, a reflection of Christ's promise to overcome the world. As winter approached, Maria stood at her window, the city's lights a mosaic of struggle and hope. Her candle burned low, but its light was enough. She prayed, naming those she loved, those she served, those she'd yet to meet. She read Pope Francis's words, Love is the heart of the Church's mission, the fire that renews the world. Maria was part of that mission, her life a flame, small but steady, joined to countless others. The world's conflicts raged on, but Maria was not afraid. She had learned to love as Jesus loved, patiently, kindly, enduringly. Each prayer, each act, each circle was a victory, a piece of the peace Christ promised. And as she blew out her candle, she knew the light would burn on in her heart, in her city, in the world she was helping to renew, one loving step at a time.